My name is not important, but what happened to me is. I was 24 years old at the time, living in a small town in the Midwest. I had a normal life. Community college during the day. A part-time job at Target in the evenings. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous. This happened during a regular weeknight shift. It was raining outside, steady and quiet. The kind of rain you barely notice until you leave the building. Inside the store, everything felt normal. Bright lights, clean floors, soft music playing overhead, red carts lined up near the entrance, customers walking slowly, killing time before closing. I was working in the home goods section that night, folding towels, restocking shelves, helping people find lamps and storage bins. I had done this job so many times that my body moved on its own. I didn't think about anything. I was just waiting for the shift to end. At around 8:40 p.m., I noticed something small that didn't feel right. A man was standing at the end of my aisle. That alone wasn't strange. People stood around all the time. But this man wasn't shopping. He didn't have a cart. He wasn't looking at the shelves. He was facing my direction, completely still. I looked up, expecting him to ask a question. He didn't. When our eyes met, he slowly turned and walked away. I told myself it was nothing. A few minutes later, I saw him again. Different aisle, same posture, same stillness. Again, no cart, no product in his hands. He was just standing there like he was waiting for something. I started to feel uncomfortable, but I didn't panic. Working retail teaches you to ignore weird behavior. People act strange all the time. I went back to folding towels and checked the time on my phone. 9:02 p.m. That's when I realized something else. Every time I moved to a new aisle, the man appeared somewhere nearby. Not right next to me, just close enough that I could see him if I looked up. Always watching, never speaking, never shopping. The store was getting quieter. Fewer customers, more empty aisles. The rain outside grew louder, tapping against the roof in a steady rhythm. One of the lights above aisle C flickered once, then steadied. I felt a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. I remember thinking how strange it was that I hadn't seen him enter the store. I usually notice people coming in, especially on slow nights, but I couldn't remember when he arrived. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it. Still, I made one small decision without knowing why. I kept my radio on, and I stayed where other people could see me. Because somewhere deep down, before anything actually happened, I already had the feeling that this night wasn't going to end normally. The Target I worked at sat just off a 4-lane highway, surrounded by fast food places and a nearly empty strip mall. During the day, the parking lot was full. At night, it felt wide and exposed. Long rows of cars under tall light poles, with dark spaces in between where the lights didn't reach. That night was a weekday late fall. The kind of night where the air feels heavy and cold once the sun goes down. Rain had been falling since the afternoon. Not a storm, just a constant drizzle that made the world feel quieter than usual. Most people stayed home, which meant the store emptied out fast after dinner. I was scheduled from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., closing shift. I needed the hours. Rent was coming up, and my college tuition wasn't cheap. That's why I was there. Not for any dramatic reason. Just to work, clock out, and go home. Inside, everything looked the same as it always did. Bright white lights. Clean floors reflecting the ceiling panels. The smell of plastic packaging and fresh cardboard. The faint sound of pop music playing through the speakers. Employees moved slowly, zoning shelves and collecting returns. My manager that night was Dave, a guy in his early 30s who took the job seriously but was fair. He stayed near the front most of the evening, helping with guest services and counting drawers. There were maybe 10 employees total in the building, spread out across a very large space. I worked in home goods, which sat toward the middle of the store. Long aisles of towels, bedding, lamps, and storage bins. At night, it was one of the quietest sections. Most customers didn't wander there unless they knew exactly what they wanted. Around 8:30 p.m., Dave reminded us over the radio to start recovery. That meant pulling misplaced items, straightening shelves, and preparing for closing. Nothing unusual. We did this every night. A coworker named Melissa was working the next section over. I could hear her cart rolling sometimes, but I couldn't see her unless I walked to the end of the aisle. Other than that, I was mostly alone. The rain outside made the store feel sealed off from the rest of the world. No windows in most areas. No sense of time passing. Just the same artificial light and quiet music on repeat. That's what made the store feel safe. It was a controlled environment. Cameras everywhere. Employees on radios. A locked building after closing. I had worked late shifts before and never felt afraid. Not once. At least not until that night. Because even though everything looked normal and everyone was doing their job, there was already something wrong in the building. I just didn't know it yet. The first thing that felt off was how quiet the store became. By 9 p.m., there were only a handful of customers left. Their carts rolled softly over the floor, and every sound seemed louder than it should have been. The music overhead kept playing, but it felt distant, like it was coming from another room. The rain outside was steady, tapping against the roof in a slow, uneven pattern. I was straightening a shelf of folded towels when I heard footsteps behind me. I stepped aside, assuming it was a customer trying to get through the aisle. No one passed me. When I turned around, the aisle was empty. I stood there for a moment listening. Nothing. I told myself the sound probably came from the next aisle over. A few minutes later, I heard it again. Slow footsteps. Heavy. Too close to ignore. This time, I walked to the end of the aisle and looked both ways. I didn't see anyone. The lights at the far end flickered once, then stayed on. I felt a small wave of unease, but I pushed it down. Old buildings made noise. Stores echoed. There was always an explanation. I tried to focus on my task. As I moved deeper into the section, I noticed something else. Items on the shelves looked slightly disturbed. A pillow placed back crooked. A lamp box turned sideways. Nothing dramatic. Just small signs that someone had been there recently. Then I saw him again. He stood at the far end of the aisle, partially hidden by an end cap. Same dark jacket. Same low hat. His face was hard to see under the lights. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing me. I waited for him to say something. He didn't. After a few seconds, he stepped back and disappeared into the next aisle. I didn't hear his footsteps this time. That bothered me more than seeing him. I reached for my radio and pressed the button, asking if anyone needed help in home goods. Dave responded right away. His voice sounded normal. Calm. That made me feel a little better. Still, I kept noticing things. A cart left in the middle of an aisle with no one around. A soft thump from somewhere in the back, like something being set down too hard. A door closing when I was sure no one had walked past me. At one point, I caught the faint sound of breathing. I stopped what I was doing and listened. It was slow and uneven, coming from somewhere. Close. I held my breath, trying to figure out where it was coming from. After a few seconds, the sound stopped. My heart was beating faster now. I told myself I was imagining it. The store was quiet. My mind was filling in the gaps. That's what happens when you're tired. But the feeling didn't go away. It felt like someone was timing my movements, watching where I went, waiting for the moment when I'd be alone. I hadn't seen the man leave the store. And for the first time that night, I wondered if he ever planned to. By 9:20 p.m., the feeling that something was wrong had settled deep in my stomach. The store was nearly empty now. An announcement played over the speakers, reminding customers that the store would be closing in 40 minutes. The sound echoed through the aisles, making the building feel even larger and more hollow. I pushed my recovery cart toward the back of Home Goods, trying to stay busy. Standing still made it worse. Every time I stopped moving, I felt exposed. That's when I noticed the security mirror at the end of the aisle. In the curved glass, I saw movement behind me. I turned around quickly. No one was there. When I looked back at the mirror, the movement was gone. My hands started to shake. I gripped the cart tighter and forced myself to breathe slowly. I pressed the radio button again and asked where Melissa was. She answered that she was up near Seasonal helping a guest. Her voice sounded far away. Too far. I realized I was alone in the middle of the store. As I moved toward the end cap, I heard a soft scraping sound, like a shoe dragging lightly across the floor. It came from the next aisle over. Then another sound, a slow step, then another. Someone was walking parallel to me. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again. So did the footsteps. My chest felt tight. I turned into the next aisle suddenly, hoping to catch whoever it was. The aisle was empty, but at the far end, I saw the man step out of sight, just for a second, like he knew exactly when to move. This time, he was closer. I could see his hands now. They were down by his sides, clenched tightly. His shoulders were tense. He wasn't pretending to shop anymore. There was no reason for him to be back here. The lights in the aisle flickered again. One of them went out completely, leaving a section of the aisle dim. My shadows stretched long across the floor. I felt trapped. I was surrounded by tall shelves on both sides, blocking my view of the rest of the store. The exits were far away. My radio suddenly crackled with static, then went silent. I pressed the button again. Nothing. That's when I heard his voice. It was low and close. Too close. "Hey," he said. I froze. I didn't turn around. I could feel him behind me. I could smell something sour, like sweat and wet fabric. I backed away slowly until I hit the cart. The wheels rattled loudly in the quiet aisle. He took a step forward. I took one back. There was nowhere left to go. For the first time that night, I was sure of one thing. He wasn't lost. And whatever he wanted, it wasn't help. I don't know how long I stood there frozen, listening to him breathing just behind me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body refused to move. Then I heard it again, a slow scrape of his shoe against the floor, and I realized he was inching closer. I spun around and bolted. My shoes slipped slightly on the polished floor. I grabbed the cart for balance, pushing it in front of me, as if it could block him. The aisles stretched endlessly, and I didn't even glance back. I just ran. He followed. I could hear it. Heavy footsteps, precise, relentless. Not random. He knew where I was going. Every time I ducked around an end cap, he appeared again, just far enough to keep me from escaping. I sprinted toward the back storage hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. A dull hum filled the space, but no other noise came from anywhere else. The hallway was narrow. One wrong turn, and I could be cornered. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. My hands were wet with sweat, slipping on the cart handle. I saw the emergency exit doors at the end. Relief hit me for a second, but then I noticed he was closer than I thought. He emerged from the dark corner by the stockroom doors. His eyes were locked on me. I screamed without realizing it, but the sound echoed hollowly down the aisle. I dove into the employee restroom, slamming the door behind me. The lock clicked. My breathing was loud and ragged. I pressed my back against the door and slid to the floor. My phone was in my pocket. I fumbled with it, hands shaking, dialed 911. The line went through. I whispered my location. "There's a man, he's in the store. I don't know how long he's been here." Then the door rattled. Once. Twice. Hard enough that I felt the frame vibrate. He was testing it. He wanted to see if it would hold. I pressed my body against the wall, trying not to make a sound. I could hear him moving outside. Slow steps, circling the restroom block. I held my breath, counting in my head. 1, 2, 3, until the scraping sound moved away. I exhaled slightly. My phone vibrated. A text from Melissa, asking if I was okay. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Minutes passed. The door rattled again, less forcefully. Then silence. My radio crackled to life. Dave's voice. "Everything okay back there?" "Yes," I whispered. I think so." Within moments, I heard the sirens. Police had arrived. I peeked out and saw officers entering the store, flashlights cutting through the aisles. They were moving quickly, clearing sections, calling out. They found him hiding above the ceiling tiles in the stockroom. A knife was tucked into his waistband, food wrappers, a blanket. He'd been there for weeks, watching, waiting. I collapsed to the floor, relief mixing with exhaustion. I was alive, But the image of him, the way he silently moved through the darkened aisles, stayed in my mind. I realized something that chilled me more than anything else. He had chosen that night carefully. And if I hadn't run into the restroom when I didn't want to think about it. After the police took him into custody, I was allowed to leave the restroom and move toward the store's front. My legs felt like jelly. My hands still shook from the adrenaline. I kept expecting him to appear from a corner, like he had throughout the night. But he was gone, locked in handcuffs, escorted past me by 2 officers, silent. The officers told me to stay behind while they searched the rest of the store. I watched them move through the aisles with flashlights, opening doors, checking under carts, and even lifting ceiling tiles. Every now and then, they would radio in with updates. That's when they made the first shocking discovery. Above the stockroom ceiling, in one of the tiles closest to the back, they found evidence that he had been living there. Not just hiding. Living. There were food wrappers, a blanket folded neatly in the corner, even a small backpack with personal items. The man had been inside the store for weeks before I even saw him. Weeks. Watching employees. Waiting for the right time. It got worse. One officer mentioned quietly that he had a knife tucked in his waistband when they found him. Not just a pocket knife. A full-sized kitchen knife. The kind you wouldn't want to face in a confined space. That's when it hit me. Every time I thought about the slow steps, the quiet scraping of shoes on the floor, the sudden stops, it wasn't casual. He was planning, waiting. He could have attacked me at any point, and there would have been no way to stop him. But the final detail was what really shook me. The officers explained that he had no identification, no history that matched his face or clothing, no record of him entering the state, no fingerprints on file. They didn't know his name, his age, or even where he came from. He wasn't a typical burglar or transient. He was something else. I kept thinking back to the aisles, the way he had moved silently, always keeping me in his sight. I realized that the hours I thought I was watching him were actually the hours he was studying me. Studying the employees, memorizing routines, waiting for the night when the store was nearly empty. The police tried to reassure me. They said he wouldn't get far, that the store was safe now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the first time he had done it, that this wasn't just one store. And here's the part that still haunts me. The man never spoke a word the entire night. Not one. But every movement, every pause, every flicker of the lights, they were all part of a plan I never even realized I was inside of. I kept asking the officers how someone could just disappear like that. They admitted they didn't know. The truth hit me harder than the fear. He wasn't caught by accident. He had allowed himself to be seen only when he was ready, only when he wanted me to run. And he had been hiding inside that store, in plain sight, long before my shift even started. For weeks, I had unknowingly walked past him, smiled at him, pretended he wasn't there. I still can't stop thinking about it. Somehow, he knew everything about that night, before it even began. And somehow, he might know the next time too. Even after the police had taken him away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't over. The store felt different the next day. Every aisle looked longer. Every shadow seemed darker. The smell of cardboard and cleaning solution was the same, but it didn't feel familiar anymore. I kept replaying the night in my head. How he had moved silently, always staying just out of reach. How he had watched me for weeks without anyone noticing. Every detail seemed like a message I wasn't supposed to understand, but somehow did. The police told me the man had escaped custody during a transfer 6 months later. They never found him.
No sightings.
No leads. Nothing. Sometimes, late at night, I walk past the same target. The lights are warm. The parking lot empty. And for a moment, I feel it again, the sense of being watched. My heartbeat spikes. My palms sweat. I look down every aisle I can see from the doors. Nothing. But the memory doesn't go away. I keep thinking about the ceiling tiles in the stockroom, about the tiny space he had called home, about the hours he spent just waiting. Was he watching someone else now? Somewhere else? Could he be back, right here, without anyone noticing? I still check my reflection in the mirrors when I pass a store at night. Every time I catch movement out of the corner of my eye, I jump. It doesn't matter that it's just another customer or an employee. My mind fills in the gaps. And every time, I imagine him, standing there silently, hat pulled low, waiting for the perfect moment. I've tried to tell myself that I was lucky, that I escaped. But the truth is, the luck feels thin. It's like walking on ice, where at any second it could crack, and you're falling straight into the unknown. Even now, months later, I notice small things. A door left slightly ajar, a shadow in the corner of a room, a car parked too long across from my apartment. My body tenses in ways it didn't before. I don't know what drives him. I don't know where he came from. And I'll never know if he's waiting for another opportunity. Sometimes, when I lie in bed, I hear the faint sound of footsteps. Soft, slow, just like that night. And I can't tell if it's the rain outside, or if it's him. I've stopped going into stores at night alone. I avoid quiet aisles, even in broad daylight. But the fear hasn't left me. I still don't know who he was. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the trees outside, or when the rain taps against the window, I feel like he's still watching, waiting, planning. The case was never solved. And the worst part, I have a small, nagging thought that I can't shake. If he was able to disappear once, with all the officers and cameras, there's no reason he couldn't do it again. And the next time, I might not be so lucky. Sometimes, when the store doors open late at night, I think I see him in the corner of my vision, just for a second. A shadow that vanishes before I can focus. I know it could be my imagination, but it doesn't feel like imagination. It feels like a warning, a reminder that he's still out there, moving through places I thought were safe. And every time I pass a quiet aisle or a dark hallway, I feel the same tension from that night, as if he is still waiting, silently, somewhere, for the perfect moment to appear again. Sometimes I wonder if he remembers me the way I remember him. If he recognized my face that night the way I still recognize his outline in crowds. I don't know if he chose me by chance, or if I was always part of his plan. And that question still keeps me awake.